This is a video on the subjunctive. It's an introduction telling you what the subjunctive is. It is part of a set of three videos that correspond to Oxford Latin chapter 34. Now the subjunctive. As we progress in Latin, we will from now on start encountering things, grammatical ideas that really we don't have in English. The subjunctive is something that still exists in a lot of European languages. French has one, Spanish and German at least have them, but it has kind of fallen out of use in English. So here we're going to explain about what the subjunctive is. In later videos, we'll talk about how it's formed and how it's used. By the end of this video, you may not completely understand what the subjunctive is, since English barely has one, but after we see it in action in Latin, you'll understand a lot more about it. So at this point, please be patient. Let's talk now about verbs and this thing called mood. As you know, verbs can change tense, person, number, and voice. Mood is another way that they change. The word mood comes from the Latin modus, which means way. And when we talk about the mood of a verb, we're talking about the way a verb is used. So believe it or not, you already know two moods. Imperative is a mood, for example. It's used as a command. The command is the way it's used. Number two here, statements and questions. The normal, everyday kind of sentences, the kind that we've been reading since day one of Latin, have their own mood called the indicative. Indicative, right here, because it indicates, right? Get it? Indicates facts. So the indicative talks about factual things. They could be statements or questions. This happened, or did this happen? Number three down here, the subjunctive is a mood that is often used to express actions that are not factual. They could be imaginary situations, they could be wishes, hopes, and possibilities, for example. So let's see the last vestiges of this, this subjunctive mood in English. In English, you might express an imaginary situation or wish like this. If I were a Spanish student, I would be learning the months now. And in B, if he were rich, he would buy a large boat. Note that the use of were in the sentences above doesn't really correspond with how we normally conjugate the verb to be. Normally we say I was and he was, but in these imaginary situations we use were in each of these sentences. Note that in A, for example, I say, if I were a Spanish student, the implication there is that I'm not. So I'm imagining a situation in which I would be a Spanish student. If he were rich, the clear implication there is that he's not. So in Latin, we often, though not always, translate the subjunctive with the helping verbs may and might, would and should. We will see, as we learn different ways the subjunctive is used, we will straighten out what helping verbs are used when. So there you have the basic idea of the subjunctive. Next, you should watch the video on forming the present and imperfect tenses.